In the fourth message of the series, Hooray to Social Justice, but Whose Justice?, which I entitled, Whether or Not to Forgive Student Debt, What You Should Know Before You Make Up Your Mind. What a strange title, right? I encourage our social justice advocates to get to work. Walk the talk, starting from right where you live. As a way to do that, I'm going to share two personal stories that taught me the importance of not just talk a good game, but actually play one. Or as the Apostle John puts it in 1 John 3:18, let us not love with words or tongue, but with actions and in truth. The message begins with not worrying about the labels we put on ourselves, but rather placing the focus on getting the work done. Thank you. Don't worry about labeling. Yeah. Stop worrying about, I'm an elder, I'm a teaching pastor, I'm a social justice advocate. Stop worrying about labeling. It's not important. What's important is you do what you say. Go all in, live the cause. Chapter 4, verse 2. Now it is required that those who have been given a trust must prove faithful. You know that what faithful means? You do what you say. So teaching pastor, me, I do a good job teaching and live according to what I teach. Elder, same thing. Social justice, same thing. You know what? This guy, Shane Claiborne, yeah, he's one of those who say, and I don't agree with him, read the gospel off of how I live. I won't be verbalizing the gospel. I disagree. Why can't you do both? He won't verbalize the gospel. He will just live it out. I said do both. However, I cannot deny that he tried to live the cause that he felt was very important. This is a cover of Christianity Today, came out many years ago. It's a lot older than this. A fresh crop of Christian communities is blossoming among the urban poor. He and a group of friends went into the most dangerous section in Philadelphia, attained a dilapidated building, renovated it, and started living among the urban poor. Yeah, I did not agree with his decision not to verbalize the gospel, but I respect him because he didn't worry about labeling or branding. He lived out the cause. He was being faithful, meaning he tried to live out what he believed. Yeah, when we say something in public, this is what we should do. Make sure that we are doing the same when no one is looking. And this is what Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians 4:17. My way of life in Christ Jesus agrees with what I teach everywhere in every church. Meaning what? Meaning my way of private life in Christ Jesus agrees with what I teach and say everywhere in public. What I say in public must match what I do in private. Meaning what? Again, you are saying something publicly, then you better do that when no one's watching. And then something you do privately, you take it out publicly and say, let's all do it together. Let me give you an example. There's a lot of talk right now about forgiving student debt, up to $50,000. Now, let's say that you are all for it. Oh yeah, the justice thing to do is to forgive student loan up to $50,000. If you're for it, then why don't you think about forgiving the debt someone owes you? In other words, don't be like this guy who said, hey, student loan forgiveness is a matter of justice. They don't need to pay back, but I'm going to collect from Tom, who borrowed money from me for school, every last penny. This guy's like the servant whose debt his master had forgiven. It's not exact fit, but I think it can go. Matthew 18:32-33. Then the master called the servant in. You wicked servant, he said, I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant, just as I had on you? You see, your public stance, live it in your private world. But let's say that you're against it. No, we cannot forgive that kind of debt. They should pay for that. If you're against it, then why don't you pay your debt you owe that you've been delinquent? That is to say, don't be like this guy either, who said, hey, Student loan forgiveness is a matter of justice. They need to pay back, but I'm not going to pay back the money I owe to Tom. Let no debt remain outstanding. Romans 13:8. Your public confession should be lived out privately. And what you do in private, then you can proclaim publicly. You cannot just talk the game. You have to play it. Now, I'm going to share two examples of this. How I ended up planting the first or second Korean American English speaking church in California in 1990 when I was 29 years old. I'm going to tell you how I ended up going to Mexico as a missionary in year 2000. First, how I ended up planting the church in 1990. This is the cover of my MA thesis at UCLA. And the title of the thesis was Korean Church in Los Angeles Metropolis in relation to present status and future prospect. And I concluded that you got to plant new churches to accommodate English-speaking Korean Americans or Asian Americans. And then I said to myself, wait a minute, I cannot just talk a good game. If I'm going to tell people to plant new churches, I guess I have to plant a new church. That's why I planted that church. And I took a job as driving airport shuttle van. Oh, that was hard. Getting up at 3 in the morning to drive that thing all day. That's what it took to live out what I wrote in that MA thesis in 1989. Talk is really, really easy. The second, how I ended up going to Mexico as a missionary year 2000. Look, before I went to Mexico to live and serve there, our church located in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood was already involved with their children. We tutored them. We had afternoon programs for the children of Mexican immigrants. We take them to retreats and fun places. And then we reached out to day laborers waiting for someone to pick them up in the morning. We served food, coffee, and tracts, invite them to our church. And then once a year, our church foot the bill, went down to Tijuana, Mexico to build a house for poor families. Every year. Look, I am trying to answer the question, how I ended up going to Mexico missionary year 2000. I wasn't thinking about to Mexico as a missionary, but before that ever happened, we were already responding to what we saw in our neighborhood. In other words, before we ever went to Mexico, it already began before I ever thought about going there. That's in the mid-90s. You see, whenever a mission mobilizer came to our church, and they would say, I'm a mission mobilizer, try to get people to go missions, but I have never served on the mission field. Whenever I heard that, I go, I'm not impressed. That's weak. That's easy talk. That's ineffective. I mean, you never went to mission field to serve there, and then you try to get people to go. Now, my thought have changed. I suppose that's your call. I guess you can do that. But I wasn't impressed. So I said to myself, if I'm going to talk about missions, then I have to go. That's why I didn't talk about missions for a long time, because I didn't want to go. And one day, I start opening my mouth. That's how I ended up going to Mexico. I won't talk about mission unless I'm willing to go myself. And there, I began to serve our Mexican brothers, Latinos. Look, you know, if you're into the rights of illegal or undocumented immigrants from the south of the border, what are you doing to actually help them? Do you see Latinos, Hispanic around you where you live? Why don't you help them? And then maybe because you kill so much, you will end up going to Mexico like me and be one of them. Eat their food, love their music, and teach them and serve with them. I have a ton of Mexican friends. You ever been to my Facebook? Most of them Mexican guys. I love these people. They love me. You know why? Because I share their culture, language. You know why they love me? Because I improve my language every year. Because they see that I took their language seriously. Ellos pensaron que este varón coreano tomaba nuestro idioma muy serio. Yeah. And then my family, my daughter and my wife, in the meantime, they took care of the urban poor, continued every week for 5, 6, 7 years. That was my last meeting. My last meeting with Pastor, June 2011. Yeah. You want to talk about immigrants from the South? Come to me. I show you how you can really live that out. Do it now. Don't talk about it. And then maybe you'll go down and be part of them and live among them. Let us not love with words or tongue, but with actions and in truth.